Donald Trump Jr., as we just said a few moments ago, just arrived in Greenland. Take a look at this. He posted this video from inside the cockpit.
This whole Greenland situation is getting a bit wild.
We need to protect this island and also our allies and North America. In regards to ownership, we can disagree here quite a lot because we are working on creating a sovereign country.
President Trump is making waves, letting the world know he's serious about acquiring Greenland. He's been floating the idea of the U.S. taking control of Greenland, which, by the way, is a Danish territory. Trump even said he'd tar Denmark at the highest level if it doesn't hand Greenland over to the United States. According to him, owning Greenland is a must. He's not even ruling out using military force to take it. His argument? We need Greenland for national security, and he's been hearing this for years, long before he even ran for office. Naturally, Denmark and Greenland weren't too pleased by this, with Greenland quickly reminding everyone that it's not for sale and never will be. But then Trump's son, Don Jr., actually travels to Greenland, and in classic fashion, he hands out MAGA hats, snaps some photos, and gets the GOP involved with a new bill. It's called the Make Greenland Great Again Act. Though let's be real, it's mostly a wish list. So, what's behind this obsession that dates all the way back to Trump's first term? Back in 2019, Trump abruptly canceled a planned state visit to Denmark after the Danish Prime Minister refused to discuss selling Greenland. Trump even tweeted that if it went through, he'd cancel his trip half-jokingly. Now, let's dive into the top 4 reasons why Trump wants control of Greenland. Some of these actually make sense, but we'll start with reason number 4 and work our way to the most compelling one. Reason number 4 might sound a bit silly, but it's been floating around. Some people believe Trump may just think Greenland is way bigger than it really is. In an interview for his book, The Divider, he talks about how he loves maps and how Greenland's size blows him away. He even says this should be part of the United States. Now here's the thing. Greenland is huge, but not as big as most people think. The 2D maps we usually see where Greenland looks larger than Canada are based on a Mercator projection. This projection stretches out the areas farther from the equator, making countries look larger than they are. In reality, Greenland is much closer to size to Mexico. The maps don't show the world's true proportions. If you want to see it for yourself, check out the True Size of website. So, does Trump want Greenland just because it seems massive? Maybe, but that's only reason number 4. Now let's take a look at reason number 3. Believe it or not, Trump wasn't the first to think about acquiring Greenland. Back in the 1940s, during the Cold War, the U.S. saw Greenland as a military must-have. This map from a 1947 issue of Time magazine shows how Greenland was considered a buffer zone between the U.S. and Russia. Back then, Greenland wasn't for sale, and today, the island still holds strategic importance. The shortest route between Europe and North America runs right through it. Russia, being a major player in the Arctic, controls a vast stretch of Arctic coastline. Over the years, they've been ramping up their military presence in the area, building air bases, naval ports, icebreakers, and upgrading their submarines. So, from this angle, Trump's claim that Greenland is essential for U.S. national security does hold some weight. But let's be real. Militarily, the U.S. already has a lot of what it needs in Greenland. There's an existing military cooperation agreement, and the U.S. already has a permanent presence at Thule Air Base, a major site for satellite tracking, surveillance, and early warning systems. The base is key for monitoring threats, particularly in maritime security. So while there is strategic value in Greenland, the U.S. already has military leverage there. National security isn't the strongest reason, though it's still reason number 3. Now, reason number 2 brings us to global tensions and the rapidly warming Arctic. The Arctic isn't the quiet, low-stakes region it once was. As the ice melts, new shipping routes are opening up, and by mid-century, we could see an ice-free Arctic in the summer. This is a big deal because the fastest route for shipping goods from Europe to Asia is currently through the Suez Canal. But that route is increasingly unreliable. So what if you could take a northern route instead? There are two major paths across the Arctic: the Northwest Passage, which runs through Canada, and the Northern Sea Route along Russia's Siberian coast. These routes cut the journey by up to 5,000 kilometers, or a full week of travel. Greenland sits right between these two routes, making it strategically important as the Arctic melts and new shipping lanes open up. This isn't just about controlling the region, it's about making sure others, like China or Russia, don't gain control first. The U.S. wants to prevent its rivals from using these northern routes, and owning Greenland could block China and Russia from getting a foothold. It's a matter of security in a rapidly changing Arctic. But the real reason number one, might just be economic. There's an old saying in real estate: buy land, they're not making it anymore. But in Greenland's case, the melting ice is actually revealing new land that's rich in valuable resources. Greenland has vast deposits of rare earth metals, comparable to the U.S.'s total reserves. These minerals are critical for green technologies. Think electric vehicles, wind turbines, and military systems. China currently controls most of the global supply of rare earth elements, but Greenland's untapped reserves are catching the eye of many, including the European Union. These minerals are essential for future industries, and Trump might see Greenland as a chance to lock down these resources before China does. Oh, and there's oil offshore too, billions of barrels of it. Greenland's resources could be the key to Trump's obsession, and while Denmark technically controls these assets, Greenland's looking for investors to help develop its wealth. That's something Trump knows how to do. As Trump's plans for Greenland continue to make waves, it's crucial to consider what the people of Greenland and Denmark think about his ambitions. It's clear the Greenlanders aren't thrilled by the idea of being handed over to the U.S. While Greenland enjoys a significant degree of autonomy, it remains part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and many Greenlanders take great pride in that connection. For many Greenlanders, the idea of the U.S. taking control of their island isn't just a political maneuver, it's a threat to their identity and a way of life. Greenlanders have worked hard to assert their independence and control over their future, and the prospect of foreign ownership doesn't sit well with them. The idea of being sold to the U.S. feels like a direct attack on their autonomy and self-determination, values they hold dearly. In Denmark, the reaction has been a mix of confusion, anger, and ridicule. Danish politicians, particularly those on the left, have been vocal in rejecting Trump's overtures. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called Trump's suggestion absurd and made it clear that Denmark would never entertain such an idea. Many Danes feel Trump's comments are insulting and undermine the long-standing relationship between Denmark and Greenland. One particularly vocal critic of Trump's comments has been Anders Vistisen, a prominent member of Denmark's right-wing Danish People's Party. Vistisen was quick to condemn Trump's suggestion, calling it an insult to both Denmark and Greenland. He expressed frustration on social media, calling the idea pathetic and accusing Trump of lacking respect for Denmark's role in the Arctic. Vistisen's words reflect a broader sentiment in Denmark, where many view Trump's rhetoric as naive and disrespectful. In Greenland itself, the response has been firm resistance. Greenland's government has made it clear that the island's future will be decided by its own people, not outside forces. While Greenland still relies on Denmark for support in certain areas, it has been working toward greater self-governance. The idea of Greenland being handed over to the U.S. without their consent challenges this progress and the hard-won autonomy they've strived for. Public reaction in Denmark largely mirrors political leadership, with many Danes voicing their outrage over Trump's comments on social media. The idea of selling part of the kingdom is simply unacceptable to most people. This strong national sentiment adds pressure on Denmark's leaders to stand firm against Trump's ambitions. The international community is also watching closely. Denmark's stance has garnered support from countries that respect the sovereignty of smaller nations. Any attempt to wrest control of Greenland could have broader geopolitical ramifications, especially with rising tensions in the Arctic due to Russia, China, and other powers. If Trump pushes too aggressively, it could harm U.S.-Denmark relations and strain global diplomacy. So while Trump's ambitions for Greenland might make sense from an American strategic perspective, the reality is far more complicated. Greenlanders and many Danes are unlikely to support the idea of selling the island to the U.S. Both populations view the situation with suspicion and frustration. Greenlanders value their independence and aren't ready to surrender it to outside forces. Whether Trump will back down or pivot toward a more diplomatic approach remains to be seen. But what is certain is that he'll have to reckon with the strong feelings of those living in the Kingdom of Denmark if he plans to push forward with any grand ambitions for Greenland. The island is not up for sale, and if Trump doesn't realize that soon, he could face even more political pushback, not just from the Danish government, but from the people of Greenland who are determined to shape their own future.